Disclaimer: this content is for a mature audience only. Viewer discretion is advised. I never thought a simple suggestion could change everything. It started as an ordinary evening, just another night after dinner, when the dishes were done and the house was quiet. My husband, Alex, was scrolling through his phone, casually tossing glances my way like he had something on his mind. I didn't think much of it at first. We'd been married for 5 years, and we knew each other's habits so well that even silence felt comfortable. But that night, something felt different. Then he said it. "Just try it once," he murmured, his voice low but filled with an odd excitement. I laughed, thinking it was a joke. "Try what?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. He hesitated for a second, then leaned in, his expression shifting from playful to serious. "Trust me," he said. "You might actually like it." That's when I felt the first twinge of doubt in my chest. It wasn't that I didn't trust Alex. Of course I did. But the way he said it, like he already knew the answer before I did, made my stomach twist. I wish I could say I said no right away. I wish I had thought it through, but I didn't. I went along with it, convincing myself that one time wouldn't change anything, that it was harmless, that I was overthinking. I wasn't. The moment it happened, I knew there was no going back. It was like stepping off a ledge and realizing too late that there was no ground beneath me. I didn't expect it to feel this way, this mix of thrill and regret twisting together so tightly that I couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. And now, every time I look at Alex, I wonder if he knew all along, if he knew this would happen, if he planned it this way. But the real question is, what do I do now? I need to know. What would you do in my place? Have you ever made a split-second decision that you wish you could undo? Tell me in the comments below, and let's talk about it. And if you want to know how this all unfolds, stay tuned for the next part. I kept replaying that moment in my head. His words, my hesitation, the way I convinced myself it was fine. But was it? The more I thought about it, the more I realized I had crossed a line I never planned to. And now I couldn't unsee it. I couldn't undo it. Alex acted like everything was normal afterward. That was the strangest part. He still kissed me goodnight, still woke up next to me with the same sleepy smile, still texted me during the day, asking if I wanted anything from the store. On the surface, nothing had changed, but inside me, everything felt different. I started noticing things I hadn't before. The way his eyes lingered on me when he thought I wasn't looking. The way his voice had a slight edge when he spoke, like he was waiting for me to say something, to bring it up. But I didn't. I didn't know how. Instead, I found myself pretending I was fine, pretending nothing had shifted between us. But the truth was, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every quiet moment, every pause in conversation, it was there, lurking in the background. And the worst part? I wasn't sure if he regretted it, or if he had wanted this all along. I needed to understand why he asked me to do it, why he thought it would be okay, why he acted like we could go back to normal, because I couldn't, not yet. So I started paying closer attention, watching his habits, his reactions, searching for any sign that he felt what I felt. I wanted him to acknowledge it, to say something, but he never did, and the longer the silence stretched, the more I started questioning myself. Had I overreacted? Was I making it bigger than it was? But then something happened, something that made it clear I wasn't imagining things. It was a small moment, barely noticeable, a flicker of something in his expression when I brought up a completely unrelated topic, a shift in his tone when he answered. But I caught it, and in that instant, I knew he was hiding something. And suddenly, I wasn't just questioning what had happened that night. I was questioning everything. What do you think I should do next? If you were in my place, would you confront him or wait? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to find out what happens next. I told myself I wouldn't let it consume me, that I wouldn't let suspicion creep into every conversation, every glance, every quiet moment between us. But once doubt takes root, it grows fast. And no matter how hard I tried to ignore it, I couldn't shake the feeling that Alex wasn't telling me everything. It wasn't just the way he avoided talking about that night, it was the way he carried himself. He was careful now, too careful. His words were measured, his gestures practiced. And then there were the little things, like how he suddenly seemed more protective of his phone, how he hesitated before answering certain questions, how sometimes, in the middle of a conversation, he would glance at me like he was checking to see if I had figured something out. I needed answers, but I also knew that if I confronted him too soon, he'd deny everything. He'd tell me I was overthinking, that I was reading too much into things, that I should just forget about it. But I couldn't. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I started watching him closely, not just as his wife, but as someone looking for the truth. And it didn't take long before I noticed something new, a change in his routine. Every evening after dinner, Alex had a habit of sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone, sometimes watching TV. But now he was stepping outside more, taking longer to grab something from the car, having hushed phone calls that ended the second I walked into the room. At first, I convinced myself it was nothing. Maybe work was stressing him out. Maybe he just needed space. But the more I paid attention, the more I realized he was keeping something from me. And then, last night, I made a mistake. I followed him. Not far, just out onto the porch when he stepped outside for one of his late night calls. I stayed in the shadows, barely breathing, trying to hear, but all I caught was the end of his sentence. I know, just give me a little more time. Time for what? I stepped back before he could notice me, my heart pounding. I knew I had two choices: confront him now, or wait and find out the truth myself. What would you do? Would you ask him directly or keep digging? Tell me in the comments, and make sure you're subscribed for the next part, because things are about to get even more complicated. I barely slept that night. My mind kept circling around those words. Just give me a little more time. Time for what? What was Alex waiting for? Or worse, what was he planning? The next morning, I tried to act normal, but I knew he could sense something was off. He watched me carefully, waiting to see if I'd bring it up. I didn't. Instead, I decided to push things a little further, just to see how he would react. "You've been going outside a lot lately," I said casually over breakfast, stirring my coffee. "Is everything okay?" For the smallest fraction of a second, I saw it, that flicker of hesitation in his eyes, but it was gone just as quickly as it came. "Yeah, just work stuff," he said smoothly, taking a sip of his drink. "You know how it is." But that was the problem. I did know how it was. And I knew for a fact that Alex never brought work home. He had always been the kind of person to leave office stress at the door. So why was this different? The rest of the day passed in a blur, but I had already made up my mind. I needed to know the truth, and if he wasn't going to tell me, I had to find it myself. That night, when he stepped outside again, I did something reckless. I picked up his phone. I knew his passcode. He never changed it. But my hands shook as I tapped it in, half expecting to find nothing, half dreading what I might actually see. My heart pounded as I went straight to his messages, scrolling through names I recognized. And then there it was, a conversation I had never seen before, a name I didn't know. I clicked on it, and that's when my stomach dropped. The texts were brief, vague, but clear enough to send a chill through me. "Are you sure she doesn't suspect anything?" one of them read. "She won't find out," Alex had replied. My breath caught in my throat. I felt frozen, like my body didn't know whether to run or to keep reading. My fingers hovered over the screen, itching to scroll up, to see what else was there. But before I could do anything, before I could even breathe, something happened. The door creaked open behind me. Looking for something? It was Alex. What would you do if you were in my place? Would you confront him or pretend nothing happened and wait for the right moment? Let me know in the comments and don't miss the next part, because everything is about to change. I froze. My fingers hovered over his phone screen, the incriminating messages right in front of me, but my mind had gone blank. I didn't know whether to hide the phone, lock it, or just admit what I was doing. My heartbeat was so loud I was sure Alex could hear it. Slowly, I turned around to face him. He was standing in the doorway, arms crossed, an unreadable expression on his face. Not angry, not surprised, just watching. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice calm. Too calm. I swallowed hard, gripping the phone tighter. "I could ask you the same thing." His eyes flicked to the screen for the briefest moment, and I saw it. That tiny flash of realization, of calculation. He knew what I had seen, but instead of panicking, he did something that sent a shiver down my spine. He smiled. Not a normal smile, not the kind I had seen 1,000 times over the years. This one was different, controlled, like he had already prepared for this. "You went through my phone?" he said, stepping closer. "That's not like you." My stomach twisted. He wasn't denying anything. He wasn't even acting guilty. He was amused? I took a shaky breath. "Who is she?" I asked, forcing the words out. "And what are you hiding from me?" For a second, I thought he would finally tell me that maybe, whatever this was, there was some kind of explanation. But instead, he just tilted his head as if he was studying me. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. "You really think this is about another woman?" A chill spread through my body. That was what I had assumed, wasn't it? Late night calls, secret messages, him sneaking around. It all pointed to one thing, but the way he said it, so casual, so certain, made me question everything. "Then what is this about?" I demanded, my voice stronger now. His smile faded. "I was going to tell you," he said, almost regretfully, "but I needed more time." There it was again. Time. The same word from the phone call, the same word that had been haunting me ever since that night. I shook my head. "Tell me now." For the first time, Alex hesitated, and that was when I knew, whatever this was, it was bigger than I had imagined, bigger than just us. Before he could answer, his phone buzzed in my hand. A new message popped up on the screen. "We need to meet. She's getting too close." My breath caught. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to look up, to see his reaction. But I was too scared of what I'd find. What did they mean by "she's getting too close"? Close to what? And more importantly, who was we? I slowly lifted my eyes to meet his, my hands shaking. "Alex," I whispered, "what have you done?" "Now I need to know. What do you think he's hiding? What would you do in this situation?" Comment below with your theories, and don't forget to subscribe because trust me, you're not ready for what happens next. Alex didn't move. He just stood there, watching me, his face unreadable. My heart pounded so hard it felt like my whole body was shaking. The message on his phone still glowed in my hand, the words burning into my mind. "She's getting too close. I need you to listen," Alex finally said, his voice eerily calm. "You're not in danger. I would never let anything happen to you." That should have reassured me, but it didn't. If anything, it terrified me more. Because now I knew this wasn't just about him. Someone else was involved, someone who thought I was a problem. Then tell me what's going on, I said, gripping the phone tighter. He sighed, running a hand through his hair, the mask of control finally cracking. It's not what you think, he muttered. It's a loud knock at the front door made us both jump. My blood turned to ice. Whoever had sent that message, they were here. Alex's entire body tensed. Stay here, he said quickly, moving toward the door. No, I wasn't going to just stand by while he kept me in the dark. I followed him, my pulse racing, my breath shallow. He hesitated for a second, but then opened the door. A man stood on our porch, dressed in dark clothes, his face shadowed by the dim light. But I saw enough. He wasn't a stranger to Alex. They knew each other. The man's eyes flicked to me, then back to Alex. You didn't tell her? He asked, his voice low. Alex didn't answer. His hands curled into fists at his sides. The man let out a breath. She knows too much now. Something inside me snapped. Enough! I stepped forward, glaring at both of them. Tell me the truth right now, or I swear I'm walking out that door. Alex's jaw clenched. Then, finally, he looked at me. I was protecting you, he said. I had to keep you out of it. Out of what? I demanded. The man spoke before Alex could. Your husband isn't who you think he is. And just like that, my world tilted. Everything I thought I knew about my own life, my own marriage, it was all built on a lie. Now I have to ask, if you found out the person you love had been hiding something this big, what would you do? Comment below and don't miss the next part. Because trust me, this story isn't over yet. Alex's words echoed in my mind. Your husband isn't who you think he is. I felt like I had been thrown into someone else's life. My husband, my Alex, the man I had trusted for years had been lying to me. But about what? Who was he really? And why was this man acting like I was in danger? I took a shaky breath. Then tell me, who is he? The man exchanged a glance with Alex, but Alex didn't look away from me. His eyes softened, and for the first time since this nightmare started, I saw something real, regret. I was working for them, he said finally, before I met you. My stomach twisted. Who? Alex's shoulders slumped. People who don't like unfinished business. I swallowed hard, realization hitting me like a wave. This wasn't just about secrets. It was about him trying to escape something, something dangerous. And now I was tangled in it too. Then let me go, I whispered. If you really want to protect me, let me walk away. His hands clenched at his sides, his expression conflicted. You don't understand. If you leave now, they'll think you know too much. I have to fix this first. The man beside him sighed. We don't have time for this. That was it. The moment I realized my choice had already been made for me. Alex reached for me, but I stepped back. I don't even know who you are, I said, my voice breaking. For the first time, Alex looked afraid, not for himself, for me. I'll make this right, he promised, no matter what it takes. But I knew, deep down, that some things couldn't be undone. The man gave Alex a sharp nod. Let's go. And just like that, they left. I stood there, frozen, staring at the empty doorway. I wanted to chase after him. I wanted answers. But I also knew that if I followed, I might never come back. So I stayed. And for the first time in my marriage, I realized I didn't just lose my husband that night. Maybe I never really had him at all. Now I need to know, if you were in my place, would you wait for him? Or would you move on? Let me know in the comments. And if you want to know what happens next, maybe this isn't really the end.